Hello, everyone. My name is Bernadette Smith, and you are?
I am Rita Mays. Hi,
And
everyone.
we are with Equality Institute, and we are here to welcome you to Five Things in 15 Minutes, which is brought to you today from my front porch. Hopefully, the noise isn't too loud. Um, it's a weekly LinkedIn Live show that I produce every week with a co-host. Rita is one of the folks on my team, and we come on this show to share good vibes and good news, things that I find inspiring, all related to the top topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and corporate social responsibility. Every Saturday, I send out a newsletter called Five Things. And Five Things is designed to share these really inspiring stories that I find because I think that there's a lot of negativity out there related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I'm aware of so many really exciting things that are happening, and that's what I want to share. So I share it in my newsletter, and then we go on LinkedIn Live and recap it for you in 15 minutes. So, Rita, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's always my pleasure.
Okay, so this this week I wrote about how it sometimes can require an awful lot of patience to bring a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative into the world, or any initiative into the world. I was writing about how my book, I had some frustrations last week with my book, which is coming out in 6 weeks. Just things that are outside of my control. And I'm not so great. I'm not a very patient person. I'm certainly not a very great, I'm patient person with process. But really getting really into the action of diversity, equity, and inclusion does require a lot of patience with process. It requires an awareness of key stakeholders and balancing competing priorities, budget, constraints, restraints. So there's a lot of different things that can make this hard work, like any new thing. But it's worth it. And one of the things that really inspired me recently was a story about how all of the things that Sephora has done, particularly in the past year, on so many different fronts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, they have done everything from relaunch their incubator program to emphasize Black founders. They have increased access to shelf space for BIPOC businesses. They have increased diversity within leadership. Like, they've just taken so many different steps. They've had more inclusive marketing. So a holistic approach on lots of different fronts. Only within the past year have they really started to do this. So what I'm inspired by Sephora is the sheer amount of progress they've made so quickly. And so, Rita, what do you think about Sephora?
Well, first of all, the fact that you brought up this subject was really thought provoking for me because there's a part of you that knows that this is a lot of work, but when you actually put your mind to it and to see what all they that Sephora has done and what it really takes if you're really committed to get this done, it's just phenomenal. So I just thought you bringing this subject up will really let people realize just how much work is involved and just how much commitment is involved. And look what and you have all these great examples, Sephora being definitely one of those that is a good example of what you can accomplish if you are really serious about it and put your mind to it. I just thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic because they're taking a multifaceted approach simultaneously, right? It's not just
Yeah.
about increasing diversity in new hires. It's not just about employee training. They're doing so many things simultaneously and quickly,
Quickly.
right? And so that is really, I mean, we saw so many commitments last year, right? And last
Right.
summer.
We did.
And
We did.
what they have done rapidly is really impressive because there's no way they can be considered shallow for it. I mean, it's so thoughtful, it's so comprehensive,
And so
and again, like
dedicated.
multi
Yeah.
exactly. So As far as I'm concerned, Sephora, I'm going to put Sephora in the category with my favorite companies that do really cool stuff like Intel and Target. That
Yeah.
really impress me. So I'll keep my eye on what Sephora is up to coming forward. By the way, anyone who wants to share a question or a comment in today's LinkedIn Live, please feel free, and we'll be happy to address those questions or comments. All right. Next up on the list is that the Grammy Awards will have an inclusion rider for their 2022 awards, which guarantees that there will be more underrepresented talent involved in the production process. So, backing up a little bit, in many industries, there's a lack of diversity because we offer opportunities to people who are like us, people who are familiar, people who look like us. They might be people we trust, word of mouth. It all sort of perpetuates a cycle of homogeneity, and the entertainment industry is no exception. But because the Grammys are now going to have an inclusion rider in 2022 for their awards, they're setting standards for diversity, minimum diversity thresholds, because they know that there's so much human error that in order to really achieve this change, there has to be a policy in place, right? That's going to sort of supersede human error.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about that.
I do too. We don't always realize that just because our heart is there doesn't necessarily mean our actions are going to show it, because we fall back into our routines and our habits. And so to put this policy in place, really just doing more than saying this is what I believe in and this is where we're going. It's putting that commitment behind it. And I think it gives everyone an opportunity to pause and say, okay, what am I doing? How are we handling this? Where are we going with this? And so I'm hoping that we see a lot more of it. I think we have, but this is, I would love to see this just keep moving forward. I mean, there's a lot that can grow out of this.
Yeah, because when anyone's putting together a production of any kind, it's such an easy tendency to say, "Hey, who do you know who does X?" Right? Or,
Hmm.
"Hey, this person did this last year. Why not have them invite them back?" And maybe that's fair to a degree, but because we do tend to move so quickly and we do like to keep things simple, it often means that we're just perpetuating the cycle of sameness. So again,
Absolutely.
having this policy sort of allows us to pushes us to do better.
And to look beyond just what we're comfortable with.
Exactly. Exactly. Next up is that the National Labor Relations Board has its first Black woman as a board member. So the National Labor Relations Board is a board that supports worker rights, and it's really about reviewing cases that are going to enable workers to feel safe and protected at work. And this is the first time in history there's ever been a Black woman on this board. And I think that that's, first of all, it's about time, obviously, having that kind of representation. But beyond that, I mean, these are decisions the decisions that this board makes affects people like her, people from her community, right? And so not having that kind of representation means that there are obviously going to be things that are missed. There are going to be gaps in
And
the decisions.
yeah, and I was a bit surprised that, you know, even from my standpoint, I didn't assume that the National Labor Board would not have more diversity in it. I was just kind of shocked. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. This is great. So it makes you feel even, well, it makes me personally feel even more, you know, more confident that some really good policies and procedures and different laws and that can come out of this. It really
Mhm.
can, and it really will be, well, it'll be have a lot of equitable things coming out. It should.
Absolutely.
I didn't even think about it. I was like, really? I just would have thought that would have been automatic.
Right. I mean, that's why we need to have these extra perspectives so we are aware of the gaps.
Yeah, I had no clue. No clue. I just assumed on that.
Exactly. And so and I'm all about beating assumptions. that's that's definitely one of my catchphrases. Okay. Next up is that Kickstarter will be testing a 4-day work week policy in 2022. And that's pretty great. But really, beyond that, is that there is an organization called the 4-Day Work Week Advocacy Group that actually consults with organizations interested in adopting this policy. And what trials have shown in other parts of the world, New Zealand, Iceland, Japan with Microsoft, this is a burgeoning movement, right? What policies have shown or trials have shown is that a 4-day work week leads to greater employee productivity and well-being. So it's a really great win-win. Obviously, it is a big culture shift for organizations, but I think it's fantastic that a company like Kickstarter, which is very well known, is adopting it for next year.
I have a question for you, Bernadette. Is it possible that with COVID and people working from home, that maybe companies are seeing that it is doable to have a 4-day work week? Do you think that impacted?
Yeah, I thought the question you were going to ask is whether or not you can have a 4-day work week, and the answer is yes, of course. But no, the I do think that COVID proved to a lot of companies, to a lot of organizations, that employees can be extremely productive working remotely and having more flexible work schedules. And I think that companies that really trust their employees are seeing the benefits of that.
Yeah, I think that having been, in the regular workforce too, that I think it makes you more accountable, because now you're not trying to stretch stuff over 5 days. I mean, you're really much more productive. You really are. I mean, you're like, I have 4 days. I got to get my work done. Blah blah blah. Got these projects. You got to get them taken care of. And I just feel like it allows you to be more accountable for your productivity versus uh, kind of being forced into it. It's like,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it also allows for greater balance. I just
mhm.
think it can allow parents and other caregivers to have more flexible schedules so they don't have to spend as much on external care support. I mean, there's so many wins from the 4-day work week. It's a big culture shift.
Oh
So
yeah,
I'm glad that there's an organization that provides that extra level of support.
which I didn't know about. I love it. I,
Okay, next up is Argentina, the first Latin American country to allow folks to have their ID say not just male or female, but also X as the sex on their ID. So this is great for folks who identify as non-binary or outside the gender binary, and we're starting to see this more and more gradually. We've talked about it in the past, how we've seen it in some U.S. states. We've certainly seen it in forms that companies have, but now we are seeing the first country in Latin America to have that third sex option on IDs, and that's really remarkable to me.
yeah, I have to agree with you that just watching, you know, just watching the this move forward, because you don't realize, no, you do realize how many companies. First, you start with the companies, but when you start moving into the countries, then that movement is moving forward. People are taking into consideration people and where they are. It's an acceptance, and I love that. I don't think this will be a fast process, but it looks great. Even at
Yeah,
it looks great to me.
it does.
You know,
And we know that the U.S. has this coming out shortly, which is very exciting. But it's fantastic because it really is about safety, right? And if someone's ID doesn't match their perceived gender, that someone in customer service may assume their gender, and their gender doesn't match, their ID doesn't match. I mean, there can be a host of issues which could come up that can really put non-binary folks, trans folks, at some level of feeling unsafe or like actually being unsafe. And so this is a big part of that as well. So I think it's my why I do what I do is all about allowing people to feel safe to express themselves authentically. And so I appreciate that this is one other way to do that. All right.
hey,
Thank you, everyone. My name again is Bernadette, joined by Rita. And if you already don't get the 5 Things newsletter, bringing good vibes to DEI, you can subscribe at theequalityinstitute.com/join and check out our LinkedIn live show every Monday, 5 Things in 15 minutes. I'm joined with by Rita or another special guest, and look forward to sharing good news, get some inspiration going for the week ahead. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for all you do to
have a
build an
great
inclusive
week.
world. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.